First of all, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for enjoying this presentation, this webinar. It's, as you probably know, every second Tuesday of each month, we have a free webinar on some different topics connected with bioarchaeology. And this time in November 1 is about the one project that we started 2 years ago, and it's about Skull Tower in Serbia. It's called Ćele-Kula, and it's very specific due to its history, but also because of a very specific way of working with the immured bones and especially skulls. So I want to share with you the way how we did it. So let's start. So as this project was developed and like find the idea and also the first steps were done in a collaboration between Aita and DAR, which is Society of Academic Development, and of course later on we had a lot of other collaborators. And before we even start with the project, we had like this crazy idea that later became like the realization. So we wanted to see the faces of people that were built into Ćele-Kula. So before we start, let's just go a little bit through history because we need context and in this case, and also let's see how we started with this idea. So in the first place, for those of you who are not from the region, Skull Tower, and also known as Ćele-Kula, it's coming from a Turkish word that literally means skull tower, Kelle. It's a structure that is located in Niš, which is one of the biggest, one of the three biggest cities in Serbia. And it's located in southeastern part of Serbia. You can see here in the map, and this little dot present the capital of Serbia, Belgrade. And for also like a little background is that Serbia, or what is nowadays Serbia, was a part of Ottoman Empire from late 13th century all till 20th century. And it was Ottoman Empire has like a really big territory, and you can see here on the map how they were conquering, like having like a big piece of Mediterranean territory, but also like the basically entire Balkans. And in some way, they even came to the border, to the entrance of Vienna. There was this famous siege of Vienna that lasted such a long time. And after that period, there started decline of the empire, but of course it was enormous empire. So this decline also lasted for a very, very long time. And we know that during this period of this whole five century, basically, when Serbia was under Ottoman Empire, there was also like a lot of battles between Austro-Hungary and Ottoman Empire about some territories in what is nowadays Serbia. But most of the time it was the life was more or less okay. At least there were some rules. But once when the Ottoman Empire started losing their power, it became really unbearable to live in these conditions because the taxes and were each time higher. And also there was a lot of violence against the people of Serbia. So they decided to organize the uprising. So there was with this also there was a lot of movement of Slavic people in the 19th century with this idea to liberate from both Austro-Hungarian power and Ottoman Empire and to create new modern states. And with this idea, like they start organizing themselves and slowly starting to fight against it and organizing and Of course, the differences in power were enormous, as the Serbian army in that moment was way smaller than the Ottoman one, and also, of course, not so professionally or well equipped. So one of the very important battles was a battle on Chegar, where Stevan Sinjelic, it's this supposed to be this guy on the right. So remember this face and remember this nose and maybe even this mustaches. But he was the person that was leading this uprising. And this was the first one, of course, that didn't succeed as a uprising, but soon after that came another one. So the first one was in 1809, when around 300 Serbian rebels under his command were facing like way bigger Ottoman Empire, and the whole battle took the place at the hill of Chegar, close to Niš. And at some point, they were like completely surrounded, the army, and knowing that they will be captured and impaled, as it was tradition in a Turkish army. The Sinjali decided to fire the gunpowder, and they're like causing mass explosion, and this is resulted in a blast that killed. Of course, he sacrificed himself, he sacrificed his people, but he waited until like enormous, like a big amount of Turkish come very close in the trench they were staying, like this defense trench. So this explosion also killed a lot of his enemies. So this was, of course, as you can imagine, a heroic act that was often described and both in literature, in poems, in paintings, etc. So this battle, although at the end Serbia lost, but this act of sacrifice and this way of facing like way bigger enemies and fighting, this was something that was really significant for the people of Serbia. So what happened next is that after the battle, at least according to historical sources, Khurshid Pasha, who was the commander of the Ottoman part of the army, he ordered that the heads of Sinjelic and his men to be cutted, flayed, stuffed with the cotton, and sent to Istanbul. So they basically, according to historical sources, they would cut the head, remove the skin, and they even have description of who was doing it and which way, and send it all to the skin, send it to Istanbul, and the skulls were used to make the skull tower. So we know that at the beginning, the whole structure, the whole tower, was around was 900 was 4.5 meters high, and it contained 952 skulls. So remember this data also like this, because it's important for the later story. So we know that so it was almost 1,000 of human skull that were embedded in this structure. The structure was built on the entrance to Niš, so the idea was that this should scare and send strong message to everyone who wants to, like to rebels or anyone who tried to fight against this army. But instead of making people scared, it actually had a very opposite effect, and it became a symbol of rebellion, symbol of freedom, and even nowadays it's one of the most important monuments. There were also like some additional historical sources that were telling that it was not just about removing the skin and taking the skulls or decapitation. There was some historians are mentioning even cutting the tongue, and also the ears. So these were the data that we had before we started. What we know for sure, that if we look at this photography from 1878, so some 70 years after, we can see that a lot of places where the skulls were originally are empty. And in 1882, Živan Živanović is describing this place, and he's mentioning only 511 skulls. So we know that already by that moment there was a less skulls than it was originally. So probably like that people would recognize their own relatives and they would rebury them. They were buried those skulls. And in the moment nowadays, we have only 58 skulls that are remaining in the tower. And there is one of them that is distinguished. It's in a pedestal. It's kept in a pedestal, and under this glass bell. So, according to historical sources, according to legend, this skull belonged to Stevan Sinjelic. So it's separated, and why they think that it belonged to Stevan Sinjelic, but well, according to the sources, this skull was on the top of the entire Ćele-Kula. So probably at the moment, if there was still some, they could still recognize it, and also like it was somehow separated to be like the most important skull at that moment. And despite the fact that this was the most important monument in Serbia, or one of the most important, it was never anthropologically analyzed. So this is a moment when we actually entering in this story. So in 2023, we launched the crowdfunding for the project called Novo Lice Ćele-Kule. And the idea was to raise the funds for anthropological analysis, 3D, and also facial reconstruction of people from the Ćele-Kula, from Skull Tower. And it was really like a great project, great idea, and we got a lot of support of medias. And so there was originally there was we started with making photogrammetry, doing the anthropological analysis in the same time. And also in the next step would be that Dr. Fabio Cavalli, that you can see here in the left corner of your screen, he is the one that is doing a facial analysis, facial reconstruction. Sorry. So my part was just to do anthropological analysis. And we had like quite good support also from various, this is in the beginning it was portal all about archaeology, National Museum of Niš, and also Republic Institute for Protection of Monuments. But later on we got also like a lot of media support. And of course, we didn't know how it's going to go. Is it going to go well? Because it was a quite unusual way to start the project. We had like these are the names of donators, and we actually managed to gather even more than we asked for. So we got 110%. So even like we managed to get more than we were hoping for. And it's around a little bit more than 8,000 euros, which of course doesn't sound a lot in comparing to some European projects or EU projects, but for small and poor country like Serbia, this is kind of a lot. And the reason why we decided to try with this donation is that we tried through official channel, through the ministry, but we were rejected. And then we didn't want to give up. We were like, okay, let's do it. We'll find another way. And actually, we managed to gather the money and to do the first step of the project. What is really significant here, because this was the first time ever that in Serbian history that a scientific project was founded in this way. So it was really great media attention that's really helped gather this money. And also, like, I think the people like everything about the idea that we are just doing this for sake of and love for science, love for discoveries, and also like love for history and our country, and also that that is something that making it open for everyone to participate. I think it was great that everybody feels like they are part of the project. Okay, this was like the beginning we were focused on promoting the project, trying to engage people and everything. And then when we finally get it, it was like, okay, now what? Because it was very hard to think like, okay, what would be the best strategy to work with the skulls that you cannot take in your hand, that you cannot put on a table, that you cannot actually you're very limited in a way of what you can see and what you can do. So first was we of course we have to give the numbers to each skull so we don't confuse, and we divide it on based on the sides of the tower. So as you can see here we have like the numbers and the south, north, east, west side. So every skull has got their nomenclature. And next thing was, of course, like you cannot touch anything, you cannot move anything, and because the skulls were like really embedded in the cement deeply. So basically, we can see only this, but there is no way of moving anything. So next up was like, okay, some of the highest skulls were 4.5 meters, like the height. So it was complicated both for taking photos and for photogrammetry, because for each skull we needed around 500 photos, and then also for analysis. So one of the solution was to use this tools for dentists to approach the skull from the different angles, and especially checking the teeth. Second problem was poor preservation. Of course, some skulls were very limit. That was very limiting in some cases, like the skull on the left. You cannot say anything, basically, because we can just see some sutures that are not completely fused, but that's not enough to say anything about the age. And also, like, we cannot see the rest of the skull, so we cannot say in this case like nothing specifically about this individual. In some cases, there would be mandible that are missing or part of the face, and of course, all this is like preservation can be very limiting for these studies. But also, apart from poor preservation, we have the problem of poor restoration, because somewhere in 1950s, there was intent of restoring the skull tower, but it seemed that in this process they made quite a lot of mistakes, and I don't know how much you can see on the image, but for example, on in image on the left, you can see that what was supposed to be the line of frontal, where the frontal bone should start it, is actually occipital bone. So they put the skull reversely, like this part is on the front. They even confused, like they mixed some mandibles, which I didn't realize at first. So my head was exploding, like because nothing was fitting. This was in one case, but it was like really like, what is going on here? There was even case of putting two mandibles, one over another, or in this case, we can see that they didn't follow the place, like how you should actually like where each bone goes. So it's a little bit of a Frankenstein in this case. And then, of course, as I said, like there's a limited methodology, because we know that in anthropology, when we are working only with dry bones, we're basically for estimation of the age and sex, we are relying on the shape of the skull and the shape of coxal. The coxal is the most reliable bone. And this is giving us the most reliable information, of course. Second best is the skull. But in order to estimate the sex based on skull, we're looking at a lot of different parameters on the skull. In this case, we are limited only on the face, not even on a little bit of mandible, not even entire mandible, because most of the skull would go, as you can see on the image, up to here. So we're missing goniac inversion, which is one of the very important. And another problem is that um, most of this, in many cases, the mandible and maxilla are filled up with cement, as you can see also here. So you cannot even approach properly, even with this dental tools on this small dentist mirror. So you cannot see really dental wear or possible problems like the pathologies and so on. So there were definitely a lot of limitation. So as I said, like the skulls cannot be touched or manipulated. They are fixed to the wall. They're embedded there. Sex estimation was limited only on the front of the face. Age can be determined only on the palatal sutures and the degree of tooth eruption or tooth wear, which, as we know, are not the most precise method. And in some cases, we couldn't even access to all of this because, of course, as I said, that sometimes the mouth is basically like full of cement. In some cases, there is no teeth preserved, as you can see. Most of the skulls actually has lost their most big amount of their teeth. Normally, only some molars are preserved, but incisives, canines, premolar, most of the cases are not there anymore, probably due to the time and this taphonomic effect of weather. Because in the beginning, the skull tower was exposed to the weather. It was on without any roof, without anything. So the first like 60, 70 years, it didn't even have a roof over. Later they built the roof over, but still it was the weather could affect it quite a lot. And only in last decades it got like a little chapel over it. So now it's in a more controlled conditions, but it was a lot of time without it. So this, of course, has influenced it a lot to the preservation. And also, we were not allowed to do any kind of destructive methods. So we cannot sample the teeth. We cannot do any kind of destructive methods. So we couldn't get DNA. We couldn't get isotopes. And we were limited only on what we can see without touching. So one of the methods was eruption of the teeth and also dental wear that we could see on those preserved teeth. So as you can see, here is an example. I could see with a mirror how is like inside of each tooth. I could describe it. I can check the dental wear. In some cases, I could also access the palatal suture, which is the method by Mann, 1991, I think. And based on obliteration of sutures, we could say like approximately the age. You can see here on a table. Uh, of course, it's not always the most precise, as I said, but we can get some, at least like approximation. And also like what is the eruption of the third molar was also used as a method to see like if the individual is reaching is it adult or non-adult. And yes, although the third molar can erupt it much later in the life, we have some minimal age. And that minimal age is for fully erupted third molar, it's 18 years. That is the minimal age. So if the person has third molar means that this person is at least 18 years old. If the person doesn't have a third molar, doesn't mean that it's younger than 18, because sometimes third molars don't erupt at all and erupt much later in life. But we use this as at least to have some minimal age. So, what were the results of this? So when we did this anthropological analysis, we got that approximately 78% were we could estimate the sex on 78% of individual, which is quite nice. And we got that all of them that whose sex was able to estimate were males, which is fitting to what we expected. And then, according to age groups, there was at least one individual that was quite young, and so one child. Uh, and why there is a question mark here? Because when I mentioned this mixing of a material, there was in one case the skull that was embedded that belonged to adult individual, but the mandible there was actually belonging to non-adult around 11 years of age. I'm not sure where this mandible is coming from. Obviously, it was added later on during restoration, but I don't know if it was from one of the skulls from the skull tower that maybe fell down or were reburied and just mandible left. So they put it there just to fill the space. Maybe there was some other origin. Unfortunately, we cannot really tell, but we know that there was at least one. And then we have 8.6% of young adolescents that are adolescents and young adolescents that like from 12 to 20 years. And most of those people that were embedded in the and Ćele-Kula were around 20 to 25 years old, but we even had the cases of 50 plus. And then we also checked the frequency of dental pathology. Unfortunately, as we had to, as we already mentioned, we didn't have really a lot of teeth. We only have 110 teeth available of total of, of 52 skulls. This is not really, of 58 skulls, this is not really a lot. So there were cases of caries. There was like cases of antemortem tooth loss, quite a lot of abscesses, calculus, and there was only one case of hypoplasia. But there is a little note to that. Is that hypoplasia, which is a sign of physiological stress, is normally affecting all front tooth, especially it's common in canines. And if not, then incisives. And these are the teeth that were missing quite a lot in the Ćele-Kula. These are the ones that were usually not present. Or as you can see in this illustration, even if they're present, the crown might be broken. So we couldn't approach it, we couldn't see it. And there was also quite like 9 cases of markers of occupational stress used on teeth. So we know that there were some of those people were using teeth as a third hand, using teeth for doing some sort of work with it. It can be many things, from working with the leather, making baskets, doing and different in a woman is often due to like making yarn, but any kind of job that is means like or putting the something like some sort of material through teeth or holding it with teeth, and it's a so we could see that as well. And there was 2 cases of individual that didn't have any teeth left. Again, like this could be due to some really bad dental hygiene, but it's often sign of very advanced age. So as we can assume, there was really like a lot of different ages taking part in this battle. We had like 29% of cribra orbitalia. This is a really high number. Cribra orbitalia is this porosity formation on the roof of orbita. As you can see, I could approach this quite easily with the Smiro. And it's a sign of general stress, physiological stress. Before, in the past, it was often connected with anemia, a lack of iron, but now we know that it's not only that. It can be like any kind of severe condition that is affecting this, and it can be like from respiratory problems and diseases, infection, to some malnutrition problems, lack of vitamins, etc. So now we are taking it as a sign of general stress, but as we can see, a lot of people were pretty stressed and in not so such a good health. Then we have also like the 16.6 skulls with metopism. Metopism is normal variation, but it's not the frequency that we have in this variation can tell us if the people were possibly in some sort of kinship, because it's a hereditary variation that is common in relatives. So this high number of metopic sutures could possibly tell us that there were a lot of people who were relatives who has some sharing the same genes and or being some sort of closer or not so close genetic connection. So which again makes sense, because if they were coming all from the same part of the Serbia, then they could have some also like the same origins. But what was unusual, again, we have to keep in mind that we could see only small portion of faces on the skulls, but we didn't have such a high number of injuries. So there was this case of decapitation on the left. This is like when the skull is decapitated, we can see it on or on the neck, which of course, in this case, it was not available as information, but also in mandible, depending where they're cutting. But we had like only this one case of a mandibular cut. And there was this also one case of sharp force trauma on this frontal bone. And there was one blunt force trauma that we could see like this compressed trauma on the skull of a small child, as this was one of the youngest participant that was around 12 years of age. So, but these are basically the only inside of the fortress of this tower. These are the only injuries that we could notice, which is quite unusual, taking into account that they were all participating in battles, maybe in some previous battles, and also we couldn't see the rest of the head. But still, like if the battle is face to face, like there we could often see some injuries, especially in the frontal bone, and if the attack is happening like when like pedestrians against cavaliers, that it can also easy to hit in the head, like in this case probably, and it was something that we didn't expect. And yeah, sorry, like 10 to 11 was this in this case of this child, and we can see this injury. And what was, of course, the most important questions was this the skull that was there separated, was it really Stevan Sinjelic or not? So we have some portraits of him, and the skull was fitting perfectly. So this was like the first, like, oh my God, this amazing! This was so easy. Everything makes sense now, until we did discover that the first portrait were made at the early 20th century, so all more than 100 years after the battle. So nobody could even, there was no known portrait of him at the moment when he was alive. And there is no known photography of him as well. So basically, all the portraits and representations um, and another like statues and similar, they are all coming much later in. So it could be based on some sort of myth or some sort of historic data, how he looked like. But anyway, it's still quite interesting that if they didn't know how he looked like for real, and 100 years is a quite a long period, so there's a few generation gap in between, so there was probably nobody alive who could draw him or something, describe him so precisely at that moment. So how did they get these similarities? And also another question that was really triggering me is like, is it possible to preserve the skull after explosions? Because of course, then again, this could be like some artistic freedom. We don't know what was really the distance between this gunpowder and Sinjalic. But if he was the person that provoked the explosion, he must be relatively close, especially taking into account what was the quality of the guns in that point at that moment. They were not very precise ones, so the distance couldn't be like as big as it would be nowadays. So the question is like, is it possible that the skull is really preserved in this case? And we analyzed the skull itself, so we know how that he was a man in late 30s. And this was fitting quite well with what we could see on the skull. In this case, we were more lucky because we could actually manipulate the skull, like taking it in the hand, like checking it from all different angles, having a better access to it, and like of course, like having the back side of the skull, and comparing to others where we couldn't. And we also have like three healed and two perimortem injuries, so three injuries that were from the past, and two of them that were actually happening that he didn't survive, or it happens just at the moment of death. And that also we find including the traces of decapitation. So we could see here the cribra orbitalia that, as we said, is a sign of general stress, physiological stress. Then could see that there was also like a lot of antemortem tooth wear, and some of them were still in process of healing when this individual passed away. Like so, there were process of closing this tooth loss. So we know that this means that it was just few months before his death. And here we can see clearly this different antemortem injuries. One was on the face, and let's remember that the one on the right is a antemortem. The one on the left, marked with a white arrow, that one is postmortem. So it's something that occurred later. But the first one was occurred during the life. And then we have two more that we can see like on the frontal bones on the right and left sides. We can see that those two were blunt force traumas. Both of them successfully healed. So we know that this individual also like were probably involved in several conflicts. We could see the signs of decapitation, two of them, as I already mentioned, that cutting the skull could go from here or from here. So it's very common to have these kind of lines when we have decapitation. And all in all, is it really Sinjalic? We cannot be completely sure, but we can say that this person was somebody who participated in many conflicts, who was somebody who had physiological stress, and especially like physiological stress in childhood, and we know that is fitting with the age. But what is curious, this skull was decapitated, but we cannot say that for many of others, which is again asking, like provoking more questions, like how did they actually then extracted those skulls if not through decapitation? And another thing, like we haven't seen any signs of cut on the skulls, that what would be necessary for removing the skin, cutting ears, cutting noses, that we also know, like that was described, as a manner of post-mortem punishment. So this is showing that even events that are happened in very recent past, and we know that 200 years in archaeological perspective is nothing. It's like yesterday. And we know that we have, like in this period, we have written sources, we have like multiple sources, and still there's a lot of things that haven't been that haven't been discovered. So like even if we think that we know everything about some relatively recent period, it's always worth going to another investigation just to make sure that is it what we know really working or not. Nothing should be taken for granted. And now that what's next? What are the next steps that we are planning? So one and that we promised, and that is going to be really finished hopefully very soon. Well, the first phases we will show on 25th of November. And if you're interested, you can apply to this the session, the webinar. It's going to be in Serbian, unfortunately not internationally friendly, but for sure we will publish the faces on a website. But this is the first step that we have to fulfill we have to accomplish in order to fulfill the promise that we made, and which is of course the goal of this project. So the way to do it, as you can see again, is limited by the state of preservation and the character of this skull tower itself. So we cannot have the whole skull. We cannot have even complete face. Many times we are limited only on some parts. And you can see here which are the important points for facial reconstruction. And some of them, unfortunately, especially those ones, will be not available for some of the skulls because they're too deeply embedded in the cement. After completing this, there are some other things that we would love to do. And of course, it's depending on many other things. But one of the idea that we have is to write down to publish a book based on results that we're going to that we already obtained and some others that we are going to get. So we expect the publication. We are hoping also to finish documentary that we started, and it's still just on a level of trailer and some material, but we really hope to be able to carry on with this. And some idea for far away, like more crazy, more ambitious, would be to continue with this investigation and maybe be able to find the rest of bodies. So not just the we have the skulls and we still don't know where is the rest, where all of these huge armies and these thousands of dead were buried. So this is something, a question for a future investigation that we hope we will be able to continue and to find out more. So if you like this project and you want to know more about it, you want to see the faces when they finally arrive, so you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or on our website. And yeah, you can support the project through just sharing or even donating. And that would be all really, that would mean a lot to us. And also, if you're interested in learning more about bioarchaeology, Aita has a lot of different courses that you can maybe check on our page and get the possibility to learn more from us. And that was all. Thank you so much.